She was never the kind of girl who stood out in a crowd. Quiet, thoughtful, always had her head in a book. People often forgot she was even there. Her name was Emily, and for most of her life, that was just fine with her. She didn't need attention or big conversations. She liked the calm rhythm of her days, waking up early, walking to work, spending hours among the shelves of the little bookstore where every book felt like an old friend. It wasn't that she didn't want friends or that she didn't care about people. It was more like she didn't know how to start. Words got stuck in her throat when she wanted to say something. Smiles came late, if at all. People thought she was cold or distant, but really, she was just scared. Scared of being judged. Scared of saying the wrong thing. Scared of being seen. Then one day he walked into the bookstore. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a small town. He wore his confidence easy, like it cost him nothing. His smile was warm, not flashy, and his eyes seemed to take in everything. He asked for a book she'd read 100 times, and when she handed it to him, he paused, looked at the cover again and said, "You must love this one." She blinked, surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because you smiled." "Before I even finished the title," he said, handing her the money. She didn't know what to say. Her face burned and she mumbled something like, "Yeah, it's good." That was the first time they talked. His name was Daniel. He told her the next time he came in. He was only in town for a few weeks helping his uncle with some job. But somehow, those few weeks stretched into a couple of months. And during that time, he kept coming back to the bookstore. Sometimes he bought books. Sometimes he just asked questions about her favorite authors, her thoughts on stories, whether she believed in happy endings. At first, she gave short answers, unsure of herself. But slowly, bit by bit, she found herself talking more, laughing a little, even looking forward to seeing him walk through the door. She started noticing things about him, how he always carried a notebook, how he could make anyone feel at ease, how he never seemed to mind waiting while she fumbled with the register. He was different from anyone she'd ever known. Not perfect, not loud, not trying to impress anyone, just real. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, she fell for him. Not in a dramatic, movie kind of way. More like a quiet storm that builds behind your ribs. She didn't realize it at first. She told herself it was just admiration, or gratitude, or maybe just loneliness finally finding a voice. But then he stopped coming in for a few days and she felt like the air had gone still. When he finally returned, he looked tired. Different. He didn't ask for a book that day, just stood quietly in line, hands deep in his pockets, eyes heavy. "I have to leave soon," he said after a long pause. She froze. "Oh, my dad got sick. I need to go home." He looked at her then, really looked at her, like he wanted to say more, like he was holding something back. She nodded. "Okay." There was silence between them, thick and full of things neither of them knew how to say. "Well, I guess this is goodbye," he said softly. She forced a smile. "I guess so." He reached out and touched her hand gently, just for a second, and then he was gone. Just like that. No phone number, no promise to stay in touch, no warning. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. At first she convinced herself it was better this way. He was just someone who passed through. A blip in her life. She tried to forget the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand, the way he used to look at her like he saw something worth knowing. But forgetting wasn't easy. In the weeks that followed, she went back to her usual rhythm, but something inside her felt off. The bookstore didn't feel the same. Every corner held a memory of him. Every book reminded her of a conversation they'd had. She missed him in ways she couldn't explain. She told herself she was silly, that she'd built him up in her head, that she barely knew him. But none of that made the ache go away. And so she did what she always did. She kept quiet. She buried her feelings under layers of routine and pretend. She didn't tell anyone how she felt. Didn't even let herself cry over it. Until one night, months later, Sitting alone in her room with a cup of tea and the soft hum of rain outside, she opened her laptop and typed his name into a message box. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Then, slowly, she began to write. After Daniel left, Emily tried to move on. She told herself that life had to go back to normal, that she couldn't keep thinking about someone who probably didn't think about her anymore. But no matter how hard she tried, his absence lingered, like an unanswered question. It wasn't just the bookstore that reminded her of him, it was everything. The way sunlight streamed through her window in the mornings, the sound of rain tapping against the glass at night, even the quiet moments, when she sat alone, flipping through pages of books he'd once asked her about. At first, she coped by staying busy. She worked longer hours at the bookstore, helped her mom organize old photo albums, and started taking long walks in the evenings to clear her mind. Anything to distract herself from the ache inside her chest. Sometimes, though, late at night, she would sit at her desk with pen and paper, writing letters she knew she'd never send. These letters became her secret. They weren't perfect, just messy scribbles filled with all the things she wished she could say but couldn't bring herself to voice aloud. In them, she poured out her heart. How much his presence had meant to her, how lost she felt without him, and how scared she was to admit any of it. Each letter ended the same way, with her folding it neatly, tucking it away in a drawer, and promising herself she wouldn't write another one. But she always did. Months passed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to change in Emily. Maybe it was the act of writing those letters, or maybe it was simply time, but she found herself becoming braver. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in small, everyday ones. She started smiling more at customers in the bookstore. She joined a local book club where people actually talked about stories instead of just reading them. And for the first time in years, she made plans with friends outside of work. It wasn't easy. There were still days when she felt awkward or unsure of herself. Days when she wondered if opening up was worth the risk. But each step forward gave her a little more confidence, a little more hope. Then came the night that changed everything. It was raining heavily, one of those storms where the sky seemed to crack open and pour its heart out onto the earth. Emily sat curled up on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the drops sliding down her window pane. Her laptop was open beside her, glowing faintly in the dim room. She hadn't meant to turn it on. It just happened. One moment she was scrolling through photos on her phone, and the next she was typing his name into a search bar. She froze, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was she doing? He was gone. Long gone. Chances were he didn't even remember her. Still, curiosity pulled at her like a magnet. She clicked on his social media profile and scrolled through his posts. Most of them were recent. Pictures of landscapes, quotes about resilience, snippets of his life far away from the small town she called home. As she scrolled, something caught her eye. A post from a few weeks ago. Just a single sentence. Sometimes, the hardest goodbyes leave the deepest marks. Her breath hitched. Was he talking about her? About leaving the town? About them? Before she could stop herself, she clicked on the message icon. The cursor blinked expectantly, waiting for her to type something. Anything. Her hands trembled as she began to write. "Hi," she started, then erased it. Too casual. Too vague. "Hey," she typed again, only to delete it immediately. No, that wasn't right either. Finally, after what felt like hours, she settled on something simple. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to say thank you." She paused, rereading the line. It sounded okay, honest, so she kept going. "You probably don't remember me. I'm the girl from the bookstore. We talked a lot when you were here, and even though we didn't know each other for very long, you made a bigger impact on my life than you might realize. You were kind to me when I didn't think anyone noticed me. And now, months later, I still find myself thinking about our conversations, wondering what you're doing, hoping you're happy." The words flowed faster now, tumbling out of her like water breaking free from a dam. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I cared about you. More than I let on. Maybe more than I should have. I didn't tell you before because I was too scared, too shy, too afraid of ruining whatever connection we had. But now that you're gone, I can't stop wondering what might have been if I had been brave enough to speak up." Her throat tightened as she typed the last sentence. "If you ever come back to town, I hope we can meet again. If not, I wish you nothing but the best. Thank you for being part of my story, even if it was just for a short while." She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Should she send it? What if he thought she was crazy? What if he ignored her completely? Or, worse, what if he laughed? But deep down she knew she had to hit send. This wasn't just about closure, it was about honesty. About finally saying the things she'd been carrying around for months. With a shaky exhale, she pressed the button. And then she waited. Days turned into weeks, and Emily convinced herself that he wouldn't reply. After all, why would he? He was living his life somewhere else, surrounded by new people, new experiences. She was just a memory, a face in a bookstore he might barely recall. But then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, her phone buzzed. Her stomach dropped as she saw the notification. A message from him. She opened it with trembling fingers. "Emily," it began. Just seeing her name made her chest tighten. "I got your message, and I want you to know I haven't forgotten you, not for a second. Your words mean more to me than I can put into words. When I left town, I told myself it was for the best, that I needed to focus on my family. But the truth is, I've thought about you every day since I left, about the way you smiled when you talked about books, about how strong you are even if you don't see it yourself." Tears welled up in her eyes as she read on. "I won't lie. I've been through a lot these past few months. Things haven't been easy. But your message came at a time when I really needed it. It reminded me of something important, that connections like ours don't happen every day. And that maybe, just maybe, I shouldn't let fear stand in the way of what matters most." Her hands shook as she reached the final lines. "I'm coming back to town soon. For good this time. If you're willing, I'd love to see you again. To talk. To listen. To figure out where we go from here. Let me know if you feel the same." For a long moment, Emily couldn't breathe. Her mind raced with questions. Was this real? Could it be possible? Had he really felt the same way all along? She stared at the screen, reading his words over and over until they blurred together. Then, wiping away tears, she typed a reply. Yes. Just one word. But it was enough. The days leading up to his return felt like an eternity for Emily. Every morning she woke up wondering if today would be the day he came back. Would he look the same? Would he still have that easy smile, that calming presence? Or had time changed him in ways she couldn't imagine? She tried to distract herself, cleaning her apartment, rearranging books at the store, taking long walks. But nothing could quiet the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Part of her was thrilled, hopeful even. The other part was terrified. What if things weren't the same between them? What if the connection they'd shared before wasn't as strong anymore? Worst of all, what if she got hurt again? Still, she held on to his message like a lifeline. His words, "Connections like ours don't happen every day," kept replaying in her mind. If he believed in them, maybe she could too. Finally, the day arrived. He texted her early in the morning. "I'm here." Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Should she suggest meeting somewhere? Invite him to the bookstore? Just ask him how his trip went? Before she could overthink it, he sent another message. "Can we meet? At the park near the bookstore? Around noon?" Relief washed over her. The park. Neutral ground. A place where neither of them would feel pressured or out of place. She typed back quickly. "Yes. See you there." As she got ready, she caught herself smiling at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in months, she didn't feel weighed down by doubt or fear. There was something freeing about knowing she'd finally see him again. About having the chance to start fresh. When she arrived at the park, she spotted him immediately. He was sitting on a bench under a tree, looking out at the pond. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, but somehow he seemed different. Older maybe, more grounded, but still unmistakably him. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and their eyes met. Time froze. "Hi," he said softly, standing up. "Hi," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there studying each other like two strangers who hadn't quite figured out how to reconnect yet. Then, almost instinctively, he stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. It was gentle, warm, familiar. Like coming home after being away for years. "You look good," he said as they pulled apart. "So do you," she managed, though her cheeks flushed red. They sat down on the bench together, side by side but not touching. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions, memories and possibilities. "I meant what I wrote," he began, breaking the silence. "About thinking about you every day. It wasn't easy leaving town, not because of my family, but because of you. I cared about you, Emily. Probably more than I should have." Her breath caught. Hearing him say those words aloud made her chest tighten. She wanted to tell him how much his confession meant to her, but the words stuck in her throat. I thought about you too," she admitted finally, staring at her hands. "Every single day. I kept writing these letters to you, but I never sent them. I didn't know what to say or if you'd even care." He smiled faintly. "I wish I could have read them." "Why?" "Because I think they would have told me everything I needed to hear back then." She looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I left because I thought it was the right thing to do," he explained. "My dad was sick and I needed to focus on helping him recover. But deep down, I think I also left because I was scared. Scared of letting myself get close to someone when I knew I might have to leave soon. Scared of hurting you, or getting hurt myself." His honesty startled her. She hadn't expected him to open up so much so quickly. It made her feel braver, like maybe she could share a piece of herself too. "I was scared too," she admitted quietly. "Scared of saying the wrong thing, of ruining whatever we had. That's why I never told you how I felt." "And now?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Now, I don't want to be scared anymore." A slow smile spread across his face. "Neither do I." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking for the first time since he'd returned. They shared stories about what their lives had been like during the months apart. He told her about his father's recovery, the challenges of balancing work and family, and the loneliness he'd felt despite being surrounded by people. She told him about her decision to join the book club, the small steps she'd taken to push past her shyness, and the nights she'd spent staring at unsent letters. Through it all, they laughed, nodded, and occasionally fell into comfortable silences. It was strange, in a way, how natural it felt to pick up where they'd left off. Like no matter how much time had passed, some bonds were simply too strong to break. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he turned to her with a serious expression. "There's something I need to ask you," he said, her stomach flipped. "Okay." "When I left, I promised myself I wouldn't come back unless I was sure I could stay, for good. And now that I'm here, I want to make sure you're okay with that. With me being around, I mean, because I don't want to rush anything or pressure you, I want to try, to see where this goes." Her heart swelled with emotion. This was the moment she'd dreamed about, the one she doubted would ever happen. And now, sitting beside him, hearing the sincerity in his voice, she realized she didn't have to be afraid anymore. "I want that too," she said firmly, surprising, even herself with how clear her answer sounded. "But can we take it slow? I'm still figuring things out and I don't want to mess this up." He nodded, relief washing over his features. "Of course, whatever you need. We'll figure it out together." Together. The word hung in the air, wrapping around them like a promise. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt hopeful, not just about him, but about herself. About the possibility of building something real, something lasting. As they walked back toward the bookstore, the evening air cool against their skin, she glanced at him and smiled. He caught her eye and grinned back, his hand brushing against hers briefly before falling away. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. The weeks that followed their meeting at the park were filled with quiet, careful moments. They didn't rush into anything. Not labels, not promises, nothing heavy or overwhelming. Instead, they focused on rebuilding what they'd lost: trust, comfort, and a sense of ease. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were awkward pauses, nervous smiles, and times when old habits tried to creep back in. But they took it step by step, learning how to be around each other again. Emily found herself looking forward to their evenings together. Sometimes they'd sit in the bookstore after closing time, talking about books or sharing stories from their days. Other times they'd take walks through the town, exploring places she'd never paid much attention to before but now seemed magical because he was there. Each moment felt like a gift, a chance to rediscover him and, in doing so, rediscover herself. One evening, as they strolled along the riverbank under a canopy of stars, he turned to her suddenly. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked. She blinked, caught off guard. "Not really," she admitted. "I mean, I used to, but lately I've been trying to live in the present. You know, focus on one day at a time." He nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. But sometimes, don't you wonder where things are headed? Like, what comes next?" Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to bring this up so soon. Truthfully, she had thought about it, more than she cared to admit. But voicing those thoughts felt risky, like opening a door she wasn't ready to walk through yet. "I guess I do," she said cautiously. "But I'm scared of rushing into something too fast, of messing it up." His expression softened. "You're not going to mess it up, Emily, and neither am I. We'll take it as slow as you need. I want to make sure we're on the same page." She hesitated, staring out at the water rippling under the moonlight. "What does being on the same page mean to you?" "It means honesty," he replied without hesitation. "No holding back, no pretending everything's fine when it's not. If we're going to build something real, we have to be open with each other, even when it's hard." His words resonated with her. Over the years, she'd spent so much time hiding behind walls, afraid to let anyone see the real her. With him, though, she wanted to try. To be brave enough to show him the parts of herself she usually kept locked away. "You're right," she said softly. "I'll try, I promise." He smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand lightly. "That's all I ask." As the weeks turned into months, their bond grew stronger. They weren't perfect. They argued occasionally, misunderstood each other sometimes, but they worked through it. Every disagreement became an opportunity to learn, every misunderstanding a chance to listen better. One rainy afternoon, they decided to spend the day indoors. He brought over a stack of old records he'd collected over the years, and they sat cross-legged on her living room floor, flipping through them and debating which ones to play first. "This one," she said, pulling out a scratched vinyl album. "It reminds me of my mom. She used to play it all the time when I was little." He grinned. "Sold. Let's hear it." The music filled the room, crackling slightly from age but still beautiful. As they listened, he leaned back against the couch, watching her curiously. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head. I like seeing this side of you. The side that's comfortable enough to share memories, to laugh, to let go." Her cheeks flushed, but she smiled anyway. "I guess I'm getting better at that." "You are," he agreed. "And it's amazing." For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, letting the music wash over them. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Have you ever thought about leaving this town?" The question startled her. "Leaving? Why would I leave?" He shrugged. "I don't know, just wondering if you've ever considered it. Exploring somewhere new. Starting fresh." She frowned, thinking about it. "I've thought about it, sure, but I don't know if I could. This place is home. My family's here. My job's here. Everything I know is here." He nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I guess I worry sometimes about holding you back." Her eyes widened. Holding me back? What are you talking about? I've been offered another job, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. In a bigger city a few hours away. Her stomach dropped. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Was this happening again? Was he going to leave her once more? But you said you came back for good, she whispered, her voice trembling. I did, he said quickly. And I meant it. But this offer, it's a big opportunity. Something I can't ignore. I told them I needed time to think about it. She stared at him, struggling to process what he was saying. Part of her wanted to scream, to beg him not to go. Another part understood why he had to consider it. Still, the thought of losing him again was unbearable. So what happens now? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. That depends on you, he said gently. If you want me to stay, if you're willing to figure out how we can make this work, I'll turn down the job. No questions asked. But if you feel like staying here isn't fair to either of us, maybe you'd come with me. Her heart raced, moving, leaving everything behind. The idea terrified her. Yet deep down she knew she couldn't lose him again. Not after everything they'd been through. I don't know, she admitted honestly. I need time to think. He nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Over the next few days, Emily wrestled with her decision. She talked to her mom, who reminded her that life was about taking chances. She confided in her best friend, who encouraged her to follow her heart. And late at night, alone in her room, she wrote in her journal, pouring out her fears and hopes onto paper. Finally, one evening, she met him at the bookstore. The place was empty, save for the two of them, and the soft hum of the overhead lights created a peaceful atmosphere. I've thought about it, she began, her voice steady despite the storm inside her, and I realized something. What's that? He asked, his eyes searching hers. I realized that home isn't a place, she said. It's a person, and for me, that person is you. Tears welled up in his eyes. Are you sure? She nodded, smiling despite the lump in her throat. I'm scared. Terrified, actually. But I'm tired of running from fear. If loving you means stepping out of my comfort zone, then I'm ready to do it. He pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me, for believing in us. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. Yes, the road ahead would be uncertain. Yes, there would be challenges, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. Because no matter where they ended up, as long as they were together, she knew she'd be okay. The decision to leave behind everything familiar wasn't easy for Emily. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at an ocean she'd never seen before. The thought of starting over, of leaving her hometown, her family, her bookstore, was terrifying. But there was something even scarier, staying put and watching him walk away again. They spent weeks preparing for the move. He helped her pack up her apartment, sorting through years of memories stuffed into boxes and drawers. Old photographs, stacks of letters she'd written but never sent, books that had been her constant companions. All of it came out piece by piece. Some things she kept, others she let go of, donating them to friends or local charities. You don't have to throw everything away, he said one afternoon, as she hesitated over a worn-out sweater. Just take what matters most. She smiled faintly. That's the hard part, figuring out what really matters. He squeezed her hand. You'll figure it out, and whatever you decide, I'll be here. His reassurance meant more than he realized. With each passing day, she grew braver, not because the fear disappeared, but because she learned to face it head-on. For every box she packed, she reminded herself why she was doing this. Not just for him, but for herself. To prove that she could step outside her comfort zone and still find happiness on the other side. Still, doubts lingered. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of her decision pressed down on her chest, she wondered if she was making the right choice. What if she hated the new city? What if they struggled to adjust to life together? What if she regretted leaving everything and everyone behind? One evening, after another long day of packing, she sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by half-filled boxes. Her phone buzzed beside her, a video call from her mom. "Hey, sweetheart," her mom said, smiling warmly through the screen. "How's it going?" Emily forced a smile. "It's okay, just busy." Her mom studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You're having second thoughts, aren't you?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "A little. I mean, I know this is what I want, but it's so much bigger than I imagined. What if I can't handle it?" Her mom leaned closer, her expression softening. "Do you remember when you were little and you used to climb trees in the backyard? You'd get halfway up, then freeze because you were scared to keep going. But every time I told you the same thing, don't look down, just focus on the next branch." Emily laughed softly. "Yeah, I remember." "Well, that's what you need to do now," her mom continued. "Don't think about how high you are or how far you've come. Focus on the next step, one box at a time, one day at a time. You've got this, sweetheart. I believe in you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. For all her fears, she knew one thing for certain. Her mom was right. She'd always been right. Life wasn't about avoiding risks. It was about finding the courage to take them. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." "I'm always here for you," her mom replied gently. "No matter where you are." After the call ended, Emily sat quietly for a while, letting her mom's words sink in. Then slowly, she picked up a framed photo from the pile beside her. It was a picture of her and her dad, taken years ago during one of their fishing trips. She traced the edges of the frame with her fingers, remembering the way he used to laugh at her impatience whenever the fish weren't biting. She placed the photo carefully into a box marked "Keep." This was her past, the foundation that had shaped her, but it didn't define her future. For the first time, she realized she could honor her roots without being tied to them. When the day finally came to say goodbye to the town, Emily stood outside her apartment building, looking around one last time. The streets were quiet, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. She took a deep breath, memorizing the details. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the sound of birds, chirping in the distance, the faint hum of traffic in the background. "You ready?" he asked, coming up beside her. She nodded, though her throat tightened with emotion. "As ready as I'll ever be." They loaded the last of her belongings into the car and drove toward the outskirts of town. As they passed landmarks she'd known her whole life, the park where she'd played as a child, the cafe where she'd worked summers during college, the bookstore where their story began, she felt a mix of sadness and gratitude. These places had shaped her, but they weren't her anymore. Not entirely. By the time they reached the highway, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They drove in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Finally, he reached over and took her hand. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous," she admitted. "But also hopeful. Like maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." He smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "We'll make it work. Together." The new city was overwhelming at first. Everything seemed louder, faster, brighter. The streets were crowded, the buildings taller, the pace relentless. For someone who had spent most of her life in a small town, it felt like stepping into another world. But he was patient. Every morning, he woke up early to help her unpack. Every evening, he showed her around the neighborhood, pointing out little cafes, parks, and bookstores that reminded him of home. Slowly, bit by bit, she began to see glimpses of beauty in the chaos. One weekend, they visited a local market together. Stalls lined the street, selling everything from fresh produce to handmade crafts. The air smelled of spices and baked goods, and the sound of live music drifted through the crowd. "This is nice," she said, sipping a cup of hot chocolate he'd bought for her. "It is," he agreed, smiling. Feels alive, doesn't it? She nodded. Yeah. Different, but good. As they wandered through the stalls, she noticed a small bookstore tucked into a corner of the market. Curious, she tugged him inside. The shop was cozy, with shelves crammed full of books and a cat lounging lazily on the counter. This feels familiar, she joked, running her fingers along the spines of the books. He chuckled. Maybe it's a sign. A sign of what? That, no matter where we go, some things stay the same. She glanced at him, her heart swelling with affection. He was right. No matter how different her surroundings were, the essence of who she was remained unchanged. Books, quiet moments, and the people who mattered most. Those were constants she could always rely on. Over time, the city started to feel less foreign. She made friends at the library, where she found a part-time job shelving books. She joined a writing group where she shared snippets of stories she'd been working on for years, and every night she came home to him, grateful for the steady presence that anchored her through the whirlwind of change. Of course, there were challenges. Days when the noise and crowds felt suffocating. Nights when homesickness crept in, reminding her of all she'd left behind. But whenever doubt threatened to pull her under, he was there to remind her why they'd taken this leap together. "We're building something new," he told her one evening as they sat on the balcony of their tiny apartment watching the city lights sparkle below. "Something real, something worth fighting for." She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. He was right. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And for the first time in her life, she understood that love wasn't about holding on tightly, it was about trusting enough to let go. A year had passed since they'd moved to the city, and life felt different. Not perfect, but steady. Emily no longer felt like a stranger wandering through unfamiliar streets. She'd found her rhythm, carving out a space for herself in this new world. The library where she worked became her second home, and the writing group gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she was missing. Slowly but surely, she began to see the city not as something foreign but as part of her story now. Still, there were moments when she missed the simplicity of her old life, the quiet mornings, the familiar faces, the comfort of routine. But those feelings didn't consume her anymore. Instead, they reminded her how far she'd come, how much she'd grown. One evening, after a long day at work, she walked into their apartment to find him sitting on the couch, staring at a pile of papers spread across the coffee table. "What's all this?" she asked, dropping her bag by the door. He looked up, smiling sheepishly. "Just some stuff I've been thinking about." She raised an eyebrow, curious. "Thinking about what?" "Us," he said simply. "Where we are. Where we're going." Her heart skipped a beat. They hadn't talked much about the future lately. Not since the move. Life had been so busy, so focused on adjusting to the present, that planning ahead seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. But now, sitting here surrounded by scattered notes and scribbled ideas, she realized how much she'd been waiting for this moment. "Okay," she said slowly, sinking onto the couch beside him. "Tell me." "Well," he began, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "I've been offered another job. A promotion, actually. It's bigger, more responsibility, and it comes with a raise." "That's great," she exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. "Why do you look so worried?" "Because it means moving again," he admitted. "To a smaller town a couple of hours away. Somewhere quieter, slower." Her stomach dropped. Moving again? After everything they'd just gone through? She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words caught in her throat. "I know," he said quickly, misinterpreting her silence. "It's a lot. I get it. But hear me out, okay? This isn't like last time. This isn't about running away or chasing opportunities blindly. It's about finding balance for both of us. You miss the quiet, don't you?" She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Yeah, I do, but I don't want you to feel stuck because of me." "You're not sticking me anywhere," he said firmly, taking her hand. "We're a team, remember? If we're going to make decisions, We make them together. So tell me, what do you want? She thought about it for a long time. About the bustling city outside their window, the noise and chaos that had once overwhelmed her but now felt oddly comforting. About the bookstore they'd stumbled upon at the market, the one that reminded her of home. About the way her heart still raced every time she thought about leaving behind the life they'd built here. But then she thought about something else. The peace she'd felt in small towns. The way sunlight filtered through trees without competing with skyscrapers. The way people knew each other's names instead of just passing by like shadows. She thought about the kind of life she wanted. Not just for herself, but for them. I think, she started, her voice trembling slightly. I think I'd like to try. To go somewhere quieter. Together. Relief washed over his face. Really? Yeah, she said, smiling despite the lump in her throat. I mean, we've already proven we can handle change, right? Why not give it another shot? He pulled her into a tight hug, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me, for believing in us. The new town was nothing like the city, but it wasn't exactly like her hometown either. It sat somewhere in between, a place where life moved slower, but not too slow. Where neighbors waved hello, but didn't pry. Where the air smelled cleaner, and the stars shone brighter at night. They rented a little house with creaky floors and a backyard big enough for a garden. On weekends, they explored farmers' markets, hiked trails winding through forests, and visited local bookstores that smelled like ink and possibility. For the first time in years, Emily felt truly content. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. What's that? He asked, leaning closer. It's one of the letters I wrote to you, she said softly. Back when I thought you'd never read them. His eyes widened. You kept them? She nodded, handing it to him. I figured it was time to let go. He unfolded the paper carefully, reading the words she'd poured her heart into months ago. When he finished, he looked at her, his expression a mix of awe and gratitude. This is beautiful, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for sharing it with me. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I guess I finally learned how to say what I feel. You always did, he replied. You just needed someone who would listen. They sat in silence for a while, the sky turning shades of purple and gold. Then, almost instinctively, he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. You know, he said after a moment, we've been through a lot. Too much, maybe. But somehow we made it work. We kept choosing each other even when it was hard. She nodded, squeezing his hand. And we'll keep choosing each other, no matter what. He smiled, pulling her closer. Deal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shadow, she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it didn't have to be. All that mattered was the person sitting beside her, holding her hand, promising to stay. And in that moment, she knew they'd found exactly what they'd been searching for. Not perfection, but connection. Not certainty, but trust. Not answers, but love.